Hi guys, welcome back to another episode tonight of the Rope of Hope podcast. This has been a marathon day and there's still more to come during the week. This will be the final episode of the Rope of Hope tonight. But if you have missed any of the live episodes, you can find them on YouTube, you can find them on Instagram, you can rewatch them on the page here. So in this last episode tonight, I am joined by Diane Lockett. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, Kimberly. I am extremely attracted to the title of your show, The Rope for Hope. I love that twofold. One, I love the idea of hope. We all need hope right now. And the rope for hope, for me, lets me feel like there's someone out there holding the other end of the rope. Like it's community. It's amazing. So thank you so much for having me today.
Of course, of course. Now, you and I had the opportunity to speak before doing your episode, and we kind of talked over, the show and all that. And you had told me some of your experiences with PTSD, with neglect, and really with processing, learning how to process grief in a healthy and conducive manner. Mm-hmm. Do you care to share some of that?
Yeah. So let me tell you a little bit about a little background about myself. For 32 years, I've practiced as a speech language pathologist / communication consultant. So my expertise is around communication. And then after that, around 12, 13 years ago, I opened up my own teacher training academy for yoga teacher training. So I started teaching people how to help to heal their own deep wounds, how to find their authentic voice, and how to come together in community and recognize that we may not have it all together, but together we can have it all. And that's such an important message, especially today. I also started coaching at that time because I realized so much of what I was helping people through was not exclusive to people who were practicing yoga, but people who needed to have support in their life. So my coaching, which is realignment coaching, and I'm Canada's only realignment coach, is a spiritual coaching blended with embodied coaching. So embodied practices, mindset coaching, and neuropsychology. As I've been going through my own journey and getting my own accreditations and practicing and immersing myself in this area of growth and development, I realized that I've probably been running PTSD for a large part of my life. And I was very high functioning. So some people would look at me and say, PTSD, I don't see that. What I see is post-traumatic growth, PTG. And it's because I've been able to use a lot of the experiences in my life to help inform me to make decisions to help others in their life. And in my servitude of helping others, I help myself. But let me go back to when I was very young. I was in an environment where I was abused. I was extremely neglected. I was ridiculed. And I became a very shy girl. So I was an exuberant, outgoing child, and I learned to shut that down at a very early age. I learned to play small. I learned to stay very, very quiet because not being quiet could be a potentially, in my little girl experience, life-threatening situation. So I learned to really shut down all of who I am. And what happens when we're very young, we have two basic needs. We have the need for love or attachment, and we have the need for authenticity, which is personal expression, being able to be the exuberant, outgoing child that I was. And at a very early age, and when I share this story, I don't want parents to feel, oh my goodness, I've messed up my kids. I'm going to give you a little disclaimer. We all mess up our kids. All of our kids are going to be in some kind of coaching or therapy at some point in their life, and it's never too late to repair, to minimize the damage. This is my disclaimer. So as a 2-year-old who wants, for example, a cookie, and mom says no, and the 2-year-old has a temper tantrum, What happens is very often parents will send them to their rooms, time out, somehow separate from the child. And the child at a very early age, unconsciously, in other words, below the surface of awareness, they get this message, if I express my truth, which now if I put on my speech pathologist hat, a temper tantrum is just an expression. It's just a different way of expressing. And what kids need is a way to learn how to do that in a socially acceptable way. But there's nothing wrong with it. It's a communication tool for kids. They just haven't learned how to do it conventionally. So they learn very early on, okay, if I share my feelings, my expression, who I am, mom or dad are going to move away. So it sabotages love. So I have to now make a decision, love or authenticity. When I was a little girl, I chose love. So I had to shut down my authenticity. It wasn't safe for me to express my anger, my grief, my disappointment, my jealousy, any of those big feels. And because I didn't get a chance to express them, they go underground in our nervous system. And we call them shadows. They're the disowned parts of ourselves that we don't want the world to see. So I showed up in the world through my career as a speech pathologist with a light. I was the go-lucky, happy person that you can always count on. Go see Diana, she'll make everything right. I was the light. And then I've learned that the bigger the light, the bigger the shadow, that there were parts of me that I was not connected to at all. And as a result, I wasn't good with my boundaries. I was running low-lying tension because it takes a lot of effort to hide those parts of yourself. So I was running this constant tension in my nervous system. The nervous system is the communication network between the body and the brain. And when we shut down parts of who we are, when we have trauma, when we are neglected, we literally kink the nervous system. In other words, we shut down part of our life force and we stop being authentically who we are. That's been my experience. Now, I follow the breadcrumbs of my life and I realized that little girl whose voice was literally ridiculed. I got one of these chatter teeth, wind-up chatter teeth when I was 7 years old in my Christmas stocking. And I remember feeling just horrified that they were making fun, that Santa made fun of me and my family was laughing. And so I shut down my voice, but I went into a career to help other kids find their voice, to help people in their yoga teacher training find their voice, to help primarily women who I coach now find their voice and their self-expression by finding their boundaries, by expressing their truth. And in doing so, they get to realize what their purpose here is on this, at this time on earth. So I've spent my career helping others find their voice. And I realize now as I follow the breadcrumbs that it was in service of me. Like I was helping myself find my voice. And speaking is what I do primarily now. And it's an effortless experience for me because I'm very comfortable with my voice, but I haven't always been. I'll pause there and just see if you have any questions before I move on to what happens with grief and with pain.
No, I'm good. Please continue.
Okay. So in 2013, I had been kind of going through a roller coaster in my life with times I was riding these great waves and other times the waves crashed down on me. And in yoga, we call that spanda. In the Sanskrit language, it's spanda, which is life goes in ebbs and flows. And in 2013, I hit one of probably what I thought was going to be the lowest low of my life. And it was losing 4 businesses, bankruptcy, personal bankruptcy, lost my homes, my vehicles, my investment properties, my retirement income, and my friends. And it was a really dark period for me, but what pulled me through that, and it wasn't immediate. I don't want to give this false sense that I just bounced up and I was fine. I actually had to sit in that darkness for a while. And that's when I started exploring, what is it in me that always feels like I have to jump up and say, I'm okay, I'm fine. And from an Aerosmith song in the 80s, FINE stands for effed up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. And so I started exploring that. I'm wearing this mask of fine all the time, but I wasn't fine inside. I was such a mess inside. So I realized that the PTSD that I had as a child got re-traumatized at that time in my life when I lost everything, because I really, really, truly lost my sense of identity as well, because I was so wrapped into everything I was doing and owned. I came through that period and I was really starting to go back up on a high. And then March of 2020 hit. And I'm not talking about COVID. For me, my husband of 15 years, who's the love of my life, left our family. My father died, my cat died, and my daughter moved 3,300 kilometers away, which something like 2,200 miles for US people. And she was my support system. And I found myself in a massive puddle of grief, like overwhelming grief. And then there was this thing called COVID, where I couldn't meet with my community. I used to teach people how to hug. I loved building heart-centered communities. That's what I did. And now I was trying to work through Zoom and processing all of this immense grief. And I knew this was an opportunity for me. Even in my deepest grief and pain, I knew there was an opportunity. My teachers had always said, when you can turn to your pain, you can feel good feeling bad. And I conceptualized it, I understood it, but I never actually experienced it until last summer and fall, where when you meet pain with resistance, and I want everyone to hear this, pain plus resistance equals suffering. As long as you want the pain to be different, you are resisting. And that resistance creates more tension, more pain, more kinks in the nervous system. The other thing that people do with their pain is they deny it and they numb out. So they go to whatever their numbing choice is: online shopping, drinking, gambling, Netflix, relationships, whatever it is. So we don't have to deal with it. But what I know from my own experience and from having coached thousands of people is if we don't deal with it, we just push it underground and it goes into a shadow range. And you know you're in a shadow range when you are in judgment of others and of yourself. That's what shadows do, is they create judgments. My biggest shadow was the shadow of anger. And so if I was confronted with someone who was angry, it really triggered me. I also had a shadow around laziness and neediness. Like, I am hyper independent. I can do it myself. Well, the problem is I had two ranges. I had independent and codependent. And what I know now is I'm moving towards interdependence. And that's this show. This is creating an interdependent community. Pain times resistance equals suffering. So how do we feel good feeling bad? It's pain plus presence, which equals freedom. Pain plus presence. Presence means attending to the sensations as they come up without judging them, without trying to change them, fix them, make them go away, just noticing them. We call it holding space. It's being in the body. Now, coming from a traumatic background, I was really good living in this very limited space of my being in my mind. I actually did not live in my body for the longest time because it wasn't safe for me to be in my body. I learned to dissociate when I was abused, and I learned to shut down when I was neglected. So to learn to be in my body was a really challenging thing. And anytime I would go there, I would feel this repulsion and this need to almost vomit. So I had to literally tell myself, stay, stay. And every time I say it to myself, I feel like I'm talking to my dog, stay, because I had this urge to want to run up, and we call it cut and run. I wanted to cut and run, get away from that sensation. But the longer I stayed with it, the more I became present to it, the more I understood this concept of you can feel good feeling bad. And so what I did is I woke up every morning and I looked at my grief as I was holding it like a little child. And I said, dear grief, what do you need today? What do you need today? You're totally welcome today. You don't need to be different. You don't need to be wrong. Now, I want to let you know, because people are going to be in different stages of grief. There are some days where I was able to turn it on and off and still function and work and coach and do all the work I had to do, feed my kids, all that stuff. And there are days where I just said, you know what? I'm not taking care of anybody else today. It's just me. And I was able to do that because my kids are older and my work understood. But we have an expectation in society that grief is a journey that we get through in 3 days. That's how much time people have off of work to grieve the loss of a loved one. 3 days. And grief is not like that. Grief is not linear. Grief is messy. Grief is unpredictable. Grief has stages, and they're not linear stages, no matter what people tell you. Some days I was angry. Some days I was really hopeless. Some days I was able to be present to whatever was going through me at the time. And so when I brought the pain and the presence and attention to my grief, I let it move through me. I took away the resistance. And I found that to be the most healing experience for me in this moment with my grief. And I realized as I was moving through it that it wasn't just grief. I mean, I had enough crap to be grief for a lifetime in those 4 months since March of 2020.
Right.
But it wasn't just that grief. It was the grief of the little girl who came home and found her mother asleep on Valium on the couch again every single day for years. It was the grief of feeling so much fear around not having a relationship with her dad because he was abusive. It was the grief of all the heartbreaks that I'd had through my lifetime, the losses through my bankruptcy, the losses of my friends. So I decided in that moment, I'm giving space for all of it. And however it needs to come through me is wonderful. And some days I would put on very slow music, sometimes no music, and I would just move my body. I would say, okay, what are the urges of my body? How does it want to move? So I got very in tune to my body. Some days I put on, I don't know if you know Alanis Morissette, but she's a 1980s, 90s singer. She's Canadian, actually. And I would put that on and I would like stomp and jump and yell her songs out because that's what needed to come through me. So I let it out because I was so used to bottling everything in. I let it out. And when I let it out, it created space. It created space. And then I'm going to tell you 2 things. When we can touch our anger, anger is not a bad emotion. First of all, there's no bad emotions. We've labeled them bad. We've judged them as bad. We've been taught that they're bad because that's what our parents were told and their parents were told. But there are no bad emotions. Emotions are just different frequencies that we get to run. When we can bring them through the heart and not just throw them at people, they can actually be really, really healthy. So anger brought through the heart. In other words, consciously. In other words, I focus on my anger and I let it come out in a conscious, connected way, not just, blaming somebody and yelling at somebody on the highway and having an argument unconsciously with someone. That anger turns to passion. It's on the same frequency. So I was able to ignite some passion that I didn't even know was in me. On the same frequency of grief is the frequency of yearning, which is like your deepest longings. And I ask my clients all the time, what do you want to do with your one precious life? And sometimes we have to excavate grief to find out what that is. What's that longing that they're wanting to bring into their life? So emotions are all just simply different states that we go through. And if we could get rid of the labels of good or bad and just acknowledge them for what they are, but bring them into a conscious awareness. In other words, make it part of the practice to say, wow, I notice I'm getting angry. I want to find out what this anger needs to be expressed instead of blaming, you make me so angry. Or first of all, anytime you say you make me, you are taking away your personal power. You are giving someone else the power to tell you how to feel. And especially for women out there, depending on what your upbringing was, you need to reclaim your power. And so by acknowledging, I'm aware that I am feeling, I'm feeling like heat in my belly and clenching my fists and just like sweating and my shoulders are tense. Wow, what do I need? I need to release this. I need to release it. So when you choose to do that, you're being conscious. And that's a really healthy experience to have. I could talk for hours about this, but the last thing I want to share is that we have, through the work of Dan Siegel, he introduced to us this concept called the window of tolerance. And the window of tolerance is like the bandwidth that our nervous system is able to be in and to be in a state of relaxation in. And if we're in the center of our bandwidth, typically we're in a very calm, or we're in an okay state. I'm never going to use the word fine anymore, and I hope that you guys don't either. We're in an okay state. But then what happens is something activates us, something triggers us, and we shoot up to the top of the frequency. And this is where, if we can hold this for a little bit, we're okay. But often we poke through it and we don't know how to come back down. We don't have the tools to regulate. And so up here, we're in fight, flight, or freeze. You've probably heard those terms before. It's sympathetic nervous system activation. And we're kind of in a really reactive state. There's nothing wrong with that if we know how to regulate and bring it back down. If we go down to the bottom range of the window of tolerance, of the bandwidth, typically we're in a state of collapse. This is where we go into depression. This is where we don't want to feel, so we numb out, so we can't feel. So the work, you hear this term a lot, the work, is to figure out, how can I move towards these ranges and not get collapsed into them, and find the ways to be able to go up and then come back to regulate. Because remember, if you go up here and you go into fight or flight, if you have to do a work project in 20 minutes, you actually want to activate that. That's going to get you moving quick. If you're driving a car and a dog runs in front of your car, you want to activate that, because that's going to make you react, but then you need to come back down. What's happening in the world today, and I know this because there's so much aggression and violence in the world today, is that people are bouncing up and down. They don't know how to come back to this middle state. And what happens is we have trauma, over trauma, over trauma, over trauma. And this moment right here and now that we're in this COVID period, is a collective trauma. Everybody has been impacted somehow. And so we all need ways to not only self-regulate, but co-regulate. And co-regulation is where we support each other in regulation. And I'd love to do a 2-minute activity to show people what that would look like, if we're okay for time, Kimberly.
Yeah, I think we could do that.
Okay, so one of the great, in terms of somatic practices, body practices, it's breath work, it's movement, it's touch. And the one that I want to show you today is breath work. And if you could take a deep breath in through your nose, I'll just demonstrate first. You breathe in through your nose and exhale through your mouth. And when you breathe in, don't let your shoulders hunch up. Breathe into your belly, shoulders stay relaxed. And then exhale through your mouth with a sound, ha. That audible exhalation, that sound, tones the vagus nerve, which is the nerve that runs from the brain in towards the belly, and it is related to your calming nervous system. We call it parasympathetic nervous system response. So we want that. So I'd love everybody to take 2 breaths together now. This is our opportunity to co-regulate. Again, I come back to one of the quotes I used at the beginning. We may not have it all together, but together we can have it all. So when we breathe together, we support each other. So take a deep breath in through your nose. Exhale. You can close your eyes and just visualize your shoulders sinking. One more time, deep breath in. Beautiful. Just for time's sake, we'll open the eyes, come back to this field, and know that you can do this anytime. And when you feel things starting to get activated in you, remember this breath. And you can do it every morning. You can do it before every meeting, anytime you need to turn on in terms of activating your brain, your creative aspect of who you are. This breath is going to help you find your pathway there. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. Now, one thing that you and I did discuss prior to this episode was you are actually working to inspire hope and help a community in Uganda. And you've created a GoFundMe to help do that.
Mm-hmm.
If you could just really quickly talk on that, that'd be great.
Yeah. So in December, I won a grant as in my speech language pathology role. I won a grant to provide communication systems to nonverbal kids, which is what I've done as a consultant for 32 years. And my big question was, where are these kids? I don't know where these kids are that are going to need this, because in America, North America and US, Canada, Europe, we have funding for this. And I was having to find where are these kids that don't have funding that could use systems because they're nonverbal, they need a voice. And within 2 weeks, I was contacted by an orphanage in Uganda. And the orphanage was looking for financial support because their main source of funding are churches. And since COVID, churches have shut down, their funding is drying up. And there's 65 kids in this one orphanage are starting to go really hungry. At the time, I wasn't prepared to send money because I needed to vet it to make sure, there was a part of me that was skeptical. How do I know the money's going to go where I want it to go? So instead, what I said to them is, I can do something different for you. Do you have nonverbal kids in your orphanage? And the gentleman who I was connecting with said, yes, we have 3. I said, let me meet them. So we've done video conferences. I've met the kids and I'm setting up communication systems for them. I'm actually going to purchase devices and send them out to them for the kids to communicate. Well, in that process, what's the wonderful thing is I've gotten to know the whole community, the 65 kids, the staff, and I know that they are legit. And I watch them. These kids are so beautiful. They're so in their joy all the time, but they are really struggling. They're struggling with their basic needs, which is food. And they don't have power where they are. And it's just a really different community. So I started a GoFundMe page. And I think we're going to put it on the podcast page, a GoFundMe link. And we're recording this on May the 2nd. And my hope is to have it to collect by the end of May and to be able to send the money to them by the end of May, maybe even sooner. So if anybody feels like they have anything that they can contribute to help these kids who are really just wanting some basic food, if you can go to the GoFundMe page, make a donation, I will personally guarantee that it gets delivered and used for the kids. I have their budget. I see their expenses. I know this is legit. And these kids would be so grateful. Thank you so much for considering that.
Of course, of course. Now, I do have one final question for you. And I've asked this of every guest before you. I will ask it of every guest after you. Through your entire life, what is the most inspiring thing that has ever been said to you?
Wow, that's a good question. The most inspiring thing that has been said to me about me?
Just in general.
Okay. I'm going to tell you what it is. It's my most inspirational quote.
Okay.
Does that count? Can I use the most inspirational quote that really spoke to me? It's a quote by Dr. Wayne Dyer. It's my favorite quote. I have a pillow. I had a pillow made with this quote on it on my bed. And it's, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And right now, this is so important because we're in this COVID period. People are losing their lives. They're losing their finances. They're losing so much of who they are. And if you could believe that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, first of all, from a brain, body, nervous system perspective, you get to change the dynamics of your nervous system when you take those breaths. And I know for some it's a hard sell, and I don't want to go on a spiritual bypass and deny the pain that's happening right now in the world. But we also have an opportunity. If we want to change the way we're looking at what's going on now, we could look at it as a transformational opportunity, in that we get to create what the rest of our life might look like. So when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. I reflect back on my life and I see how everything helped me to evolve the evolution of my soul. Was it painful? Yes. Would I want it on anybody else? Absolutely not. Do I understand it on a human level? No. But on a soul level, if I believe that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, I know that everything happened for the evolution of my soul, and I'm here to share, to make a difference for other people.
I love that. I love that. And with your permission, I am going to make a slide of that and put that on the page as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah.
So again, thank you so much for coming on tonight. You guys, this is the last episode tonight of The Rope of Hope, but I am going to be back tomorrow with 3 more episodes.
Wow.
So definitely tune in and just gain some hope, gain some inspiration, because that's what this is here for. If you are inspired by this podcast, if you're inspired by the stories that are being shared, please consider supporting me and buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/thisfatgirllife. You guys have a great night, and I will see you later.
Thank you.